My grandson grabbed my wrist so hard it left a mark. Not a bruise, a grip. The kind that says, "Don't ask questions, just move." Noah was 21 years old. He'd never once raised his voice at me, so when his fingers wrapped around my wrist in the middle of that dinner party, his mother's dinner party, my daughter Renee's dinner party, and he pulled me toward the door like the building was on fire, I didn't fight him. I walked. "Noah!" "Not here." His voice was barely above a breath. "Please, Grandma Maddie, not here." My name is Madeleine Mills. I'm 67 years old. I own 14 rental properties across Cook County, Illinois. I built every single one of them myself, not with a husband's money, not with inheritance, not with luck, with a mop in one hand and a lease agreement in the other, starting at age 29 in a drafty duplex off Cicero Avenue. My daughter Renee knew exactly what I was worth. So did her husband, Derek Purcell. That's important. Remember their names. The party had been sold to me as a birthday dinner, Derek's birthday. Small gathering, Mom, just family and a couple of friends. That's what Renee had said on the phone, her voice soft and sweet in that practiced way of hers. But when I arrived at their house in Elmhurst that Saturday night, there were 16 people around that dining room table. People I didn't know, people in expensive shoes who kept asking me very specific questions. "You manage all the properties yourself, Madeleine? Must be exhausting at your age. Have you thought about simplifying, a trust maybe, consolidation?" I remember thinking, who talks like this at a birthday party? The wine was exceptional. I noticed that too. Not the bottle Derek usually serves, some $14 Merlot from Jewel Osco. No, this was something else entirely. Rich, almost syrupy. My glass was never empty, even when I barely touched it. I should have left then, I know that now. But the food was good, and Renee was being kind to me for the first time in months, and there's something about wanting to believe your own daughter isn't capable of what she's actually planning. Noah appeared behind my chair around 8:30. He'd been quiet all night, picking at his food, not laughing at Derek's jokes like everyone else at the table. I'd noticed, but said nothing. He was a college kid. They always had something heavy on their minds. Then his hand found my wrist, and his eyes. God, his eyes. I'd seen that look once before, when he was 7 years old and watched a car hit a dog on our street. That helpless, horrified look of someone witnessing something they can't undo. "We have to go," he whispered. "Right now." Renee appeared instantly, like she'd been watching for exactly this moment. "Noah, honey, we haven't even cut the cake." "Grandma needs air," he whispered. "She's fine. Madeleine, you're fine, aren't you?" And here's the thing. I wasn't sure. My thoughts felt slow, heavy, like trying to walk through water. I'd had maybe 2 glasses of wine, possibly 3, but the room had a strange soft edge to it that I couldn't explain. "I could use some air," I said. Derek stood up from the head of the table, smoothly, calmly, the way men stand up when they're trying to control something without looking like they're controlling it. "Madeleine, before you go, there's actually someone upstairs who'd love to meet you. Business contact of mine. Won't take 5 minutes." Noah's grip tightened, and that's when I knew. We got outside. Cold Chicago air hit me like a slap, and I needed it. Noah walked me to the far end of the driveway, away from the windows, and turned to face me. His hands were shaking. "There's a man upstairs, a lawyer. He has documents, Grandma, transfer papers, for the properties." The cold went deeper than the air. "They put something in your wine." He couldn't get the words out. "I heard them talking last night, Mom and Derek. I heard her say by the time dessert's done, she'll sign anything." Madeleine Mills, 14 properties, 40 years of work, and my daughter had spent the last 6 months figuring out how to take it all in one evening. I looked back at the house. Through the dining room window, I could see Renee standing at the head of the table, waiting for me to come back in. She was still smiling. I called 911 from that driveway. Noah stood beside me the whole time, holding my hand. Before this story is over, you'll find out what was in my wine, what those documents actually said, and how deep Renee and Derek's plan really went. But right now, if this has ever happened to you or someone you love, tell me in the comments and subscribe to the channel, because this story is just getting started. I didn't sleep. Not because of the drug, though the doctors told me it would take 18 hours to fully clear my system. Not because of the IV they put in my arm at Rush University Medical Center at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. Not because of the police officer who sat beside my hospital bed with a notepad and a face that stayed carefully neutral while I told him my daughter had poisoned me. I didn't sleep because I kept seeing Renee's smile through that window. Calm, patient, waiting. That's what scared me most. Not the rage I'd expected from her, not the desperation, the calm, like she'd done the math 100 times and knew exactly how the evening was supposed to end. The toxicology report came back at 6 a.m. Midazolam, not a veterinary drug, not something crude. Midazolam is a pharmaceutical sedative, the kind used in surgical procedures, the kind that produces what doctors call anterograde amnesia, meaning you stay conscious, you appear cooperative, you can hold a pen and follow simple instructions, but afterward you remember almost nothing. They hadn't just planned to drug me. They'd planned to make sure I couldn't prove I'd been drugged. No slurred speech, no stumbling, just a pleasant, agreeable 67-year-old woman who sat down with a lawyer, reviewed some documents, and signed her name. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Carla Odom, 12 years on Chicago financial crimes. She read the tox report without blinking. This wasn't improvised, she said. Midazolam doesn't come from someone's medicine cabinet. We need to know who sourced it and how long ago. I already had a guess. Derek Purcell had been my son-in-law for 11 years. Before Renee, he'd had 2 other business ventures collapse, one in Indianapolis, one in Memphis. Both times he'd walked away owing people money he never repaid. I knew this because I'd researched him before their wedding. I'd shown Renee the records. She'd accused me of being controlling and stopped speaking to me for 4 months. She married him anyway. What I didn't know, what Detective Odom told me that morning in the hospital, was that Derek had a contact, a man named Stuart Briggs, pharmaceutical sales rep, former, actually, fired 2 years ago from a distribution company in Schaumburg for inventory discrepancies. Stuart Briggs was at the dinner party. I recognized the name the moment Odom said it. The man in the gray blazer who'd asked me about property consolidation, who'd refilled my wine glass twice without being asked. He'd been sitting 3 feet from me all night. Noah arrived at the hospital at 7:30 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee and the look of someone who'd been awake even longer than I had. He sat down, didn't say anything for a moment, just handed me the coffee. "Mom called," he finally said. I waited. She said I misunderstood what I saw, that it was just wine, that the lawyer upstairs was there for Derek's business, nothing to do with you. She said I humiliated the whole family by overreacting. He paused. She cried. "Did you believe her?" He looked at his hands. I believed her for 30 seconds, then I remembered her face when you walked out that door. I reached over and put my hand on his arm. He was shaking again, not from cold, from something harder to name, the particular grief of watching a parent become a stranger. "What did she say about the documents?" I asked. Noah looked up. She said there were no documents. But there were. Detective Odom had executed a search warrant on the Elmhurst house by 9 a.m. Sunday morning. What they found in Derek's home office would later take up 11 pages of a criminal complaint. A property transfer agreement, drafted by a licensed Illinois attorney named Garrett Lowe, transferring controlling interest to Mills Property Group to a newly formed LLC, Renee Mills Purcell, sole managing member. The LLC had been incorporated 4 months ago. 4 months, while Renee was calling me on Sundays, while she was coming to my house for coffee, while she was telling me she was worried about me living alone, that maybe I should think about downsizing, that she just wanted what was best for me. 4 months. There was also a second document, a healthcare directive, the kind that grants a family member authority to make decisions if you're deemed unable to make them yourself. A doctor I'd never heard of signed an affidavit stating he'd evaluated me and had moderate concerns about my cognitive function. I'd never met this doctor, never been to his office, never spoken his name. His signature was dated 3 weeks ago. I sat with that piece of paper for a long time, not because it surprised me, because of what it meant. You don't forge a cognitive evaluation if you're not planning to use it, unless at some point, not maybe that night, maybe months later, you intend to have someone declared incompetent. They weren't just trying to get my signature. They were building a case to take my mind on paper. Detective Odom watched my face while I read. When I looked up, she said quietly, "Mrs. Mills, is there anyone you trust, attorney, financial advisor, you can call first thing tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I said. "I'd call them tonight." Noah drove me home just after noon. My house sat on a quiet street in Berwyn, same house I'd owned for 31 years, same oak tree in the front yard that my late husband Gerald planted the spring before he died. We sat in the driveway for a moment. "Grandma," Noah's voice was careful, "what are you going to do?" I looked at that oak tree, thought about Gerald, thought about the duplex on Cicero Avenue and the first lease I ever signed, and every difficult tenant and broken furnace and 3 a.m. emergency call that had built 14 properties out of nothing. "I'm going to make sure," I said, "that every single person who touched this plan answers for it." Noah nodded slowly. "And Noah, don't go back to that house." He was quiet for a second. Then, "I know." I went inside, made tea, opened my laptop. I had 14 properties and 40 years of records. Renee and Derek had forged documents, sourced illegal pharmaceuticals, and recruited a disbarred adjacent attorney and a fired pharmaceutical rep. But they'd made one mistake. They left me standing. I didn't hire the first attorney who called, or the second, or the fifth. By Monday morning, 11 lawyers had left messages on my phone. Word travels fast in Cook County when a property portfolio worth several $1,000,000 becomes the center of a criminal investigation. I let them all go to voicemail and called the one person I trusted completely, Vera Hutchins, 71 years old, retired Cook County Circuit Court judge, my neighbor for 22 years, and the only person besides Noah who knew the full story before the police did. She picked up on the first ring. "I already heard," she said. "Come over." Vera's kitchen table became my war room. She recommended a financial crimes attorney named James O'Coffer, sharp, quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. He arrived at Vera's house Monday afternoon with a leather briefcase and no small talk. I laid out everything: the tox report, the forged documents, the fake cognitive evaluation signed by a Dr. Paul Merritt, whose office, it turned out, was a single room above a payday loan shop in Cicero. James read every page without interrupting. When he finished, he looked up. "Mrs. Mills, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. How long has your daughter had access to your financial records?" The question landed somewhere uncomfortable. The answer was 11 years, since she married Derek, since I trusted her enough to list her as emergency contact on my property management accounts, since I'd added her name to just one of my LLC operating agreements in case something happened to me. One door. That's all they needed. James set down his pen. "Then we have a bigger problem than Saturday night." The private investigator James hired was a woman named Sonia Park, former IRS auditor. She didn't look like what you'd expect: small, quiet, the kind of person who became invisible in a room. She called me Wednesday evening. "Mrs. Mills, I need you to sit down." I was already sitting. "Derek Purcell has been using your name as collateral on loans since 2021, 3 separate lenders, total exposure," she paused, $412,000. The number didn't process immediately. It just sat there. "He represented himself as your business partner on the loan applications. In 2 cases, he submitted documents with what appears to be your signature authorizing him to act on your behalf." "I never signed anything." "I know. The signatures don't match your authenticated records." Another pause. "Mrs. Mills, there's more." There was always more. Renee worked as a client services manager at a wealth management firm in Oak Brook. Past tense, as of Tuesday, she'd been placed on administrative leave pending an internal audit triggered by Detective Odom's investigation. But before that, for the previous 14 months, Renee had managed the accounts of 23 clients, mostly retirees, mostly people who trusted her the way elderly people trust someone who smiles warmly and remembers their grandchildren's names. Sonia's report identified 9 of those clients whose account statements had been quietly, carefully altered, small amounts at first, then larger ones, skimmed and redirected through a series of transfers that Sonia took 3 days to untangle. Total, just over $300,000. Stolen from 9 people who thought Renee was helping them. I sat with that for a long time. This wasn't desperation. Desperate people grab and run. This was architecture. Renee and Derek had spent years building something, a slow, methodical machine designed to drain everyone around them and leave no fingerprints. I was supposed to be the final piece, the biggest score. Thursday morning, I drove to Sonia's office in Evanston and sat across from her with the full report between us. "These 9 clients," I said, "do they know?" "No. The firm's audit is ongoing, but hasn't notified them yet. Could take weeks." "And Derek's lenders?" "Still in the dark. He's been making minimum payments to keep them quiet." I looked out Sonia's window at the gray November sky over Lake Michigan. A container ship moved slowly across the water, slow and steady, deliberate. "I want to contact them, all of them." Sonia and James exchanged a look. James leaned forward. "Madeleine, the DA's office has asked us not to interfere with their—" I'm not interfering. I kept my voice even. These are people who are being stolen from right now, today, while we sit here being careful. They deserve to know. It could complicate the prosecution, or it could give 19 additional victims standing in court. I looked at him directly. How many elderly people have to lose their savings before we decide protecting the case matters more than protecting the people? Silence. James picked up his pen. I'll need to review the legal exposure. You have until tomorrow morning. That night, Noah came over for dinner. First time he'd been to my house since the hospital. He looked hollowed out, the particular exhaustion of someone processing a grief they don't have language for yet. We ate without much conversation. Soup, bread, the small, ordinary comfort of a warm kitchen. Halfway through dinner, he said, "She called me again." I didn't ask who. She said you're trying to destroy the family, that you've always resented her happiness, that this is all because you never respected Derek. He stared at his bowl. She said I chose a side, and now I have to live with it. What did you say? He looked up. I chose you. My throat tightened. I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. Noah, I reached across the table. They built all of it. It was going to collapse eventually. You didn't cause this. You just refused to be part of it. He nodded, but his eyes were wet. And I understood then that justice and grief weren't opposites. You could want accountability and still mourn the person you thought your mother was. Both things could live in the same chest at the same time. Friday morning, James called. It's legal. Technically, you're notifying potential fraud victims of information you obtained through a licensed investigator. No obstruction. He paused. But Madeleine, once you send those letters, there's no slowing this down. Good, I said. Derek and Renee will know it was you. They already know who I am. I sealed 19 envelopes that afternoon. Vera helped me. We sat at her kitchen table with the evidence packets, the account records, the documented proof of what had been taken from each person. She handed me the last envelope, didn't say anything, just looked at me with the eyes of a woman who'd spent 30 years in a courtroom watching what happened when the wrong people went unchecked. I sealed it. The courier picked everything up at 4 p.m. By Friday evening, 19 people would open their mail and discover the truth. By Saturday morning, everything would be on fire. My phone rang at 9 p.m. Friday night. It wasn't one of the victims. It was Renee, and what she said stopped me cold. I almost didn't answer. Her name on my screen, 4 rings, Vera watching me from across the kitchen table without a word. I picked up. How could you? Not a question, the flattest 3 words I'd ever heard. No tears, no shouting, just that hollow statement dropped into the phone like something already dead. Renee? Those were my clients, my career. You sent strangers my private. They weren't your clients. I kept my voice level. They were people who trusted you with their retirement savings, and you stole from them. That is not what happened. Then explain what happened. Silence. Derek handled the financial side. I didn't know the specific. Stop. I sat down hard. I have documents with my forged signature. I have a tox report with my blood in it. I have a cognitive evaluation signed by a doctor who has never once been in the same room as me. Don't tell me you didn't know. The silence after that was different. Longer. Something underneath her anger had cracked open. We were drowning, Mom. I closed my eyes. Derek's loans, the debt. I didn't know how bad it was until last year, and by then he'd already started and I didn't know how to get out. So you decided to take mine. I built those properties while your father was dying. My voice broke on that, just slightly. I worked nights. I missed things. I know I missed things. I built something real so you'd never have to struggle the way I did. I stopped, breathed, and you tried to take it while I was unconscious at your dinner table. The sound she made wasn't crying. It was something rawer, something that had been compressed too long under too many lies. I know, she whispered. I know what we did. She didn't ask me to drop the charges. I'd expected negotiation, a final play. There was none of that, just the flat, exhausted sound of someone who had been running and finally stopped. What she said instead, "Is Noah okay?" I looked toward the doorway. Noah had come downstairs when he heard my voice change, standing there, arms crossed, watching. "He's here," I said. "Tell him I'm sorry he had to be the one." The line went dead. Noah didn't ask what she said. He sat down across from me, same chair he'd used as a little boy doing homework while I paid bills, and looked at the table. "She knew," he said. Not a question. "She knew." He nodded. "I keep trying to find the exact moment she became—" He shook his head. "I can't find it." "You won't," I said. "It doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in 100 small choices, each one a little worse than the last, until one day you're watching your mother's wine get refilled and telling yourself it's fine." He looked up. "How are you not angrier?" "I am angry, but anger without direction is just noise." I met his eyes. "When someone tries to destroy me, I don't burn things down. I build something they can't touch." Derek was arrested Saturday morning, caught at a Joliet motel after someone in his network tipped him off about the letters. He'd made it 40 miles. Renee was taken in for questioning that afternoon. Noah told me she'd packed a bag the night before, like she'd been expecting it. Stuart Briggs, the man who'd supplied the midazolam and stood 3 feet from me all night refilling my glass, was arrested in Schaumburg. He'd wiped his phone and his laptop. It didn't matter. The payment from Derek's account was sitting in his financial records like a signed confession. Attorney Garrett Lowe surrendered his license before the disciplinary board could convene. His statement called it a serious lapse in professional judgment. I found that generous. The calls from Renee's victims came all Saturday afternoon. Not all angry, some just confused. The peculiar bewilderment of people discovering that someone who sat in their living room, held their hand, asked about their grandchildren, had been lying to their face the entire time. A woman named Dorothy Hale called at 3 p.m., 74, retired librarian from Downers Grove. Was any of it real? I didn't have a clean answer. The Renee who'd asked about Noah with something genuine in her voice, I didn't think she was entirely hollow, but real feeling didn't excuse deliberate harm. Guilt didn't cancel theft. She chose this, I told Dorothy. Whatever she felt, she chose this anyway. A pause. Then, I kept thinking I'd missed something, done something wrong. "You didn't miss anything," I said. She was very careful. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table in the quiet. That deep November stillness, unique to Chicago suburbs when the cold has fully arrived and everyone has pulled themselves inside. I thought about Dorothy trusting a woman already calculating how to use that trust against her. Then my phone buzzed. Detective Odom. "Charges filed. wire fraud, elder financial abuse, conspiracy, unlawful administration of a controlled substance, all 4 defendants. Thought you should hear it from me first. I read it twice, set the phone face down, walked to the window, looked out at the dark street and the oak tree Gerald planted the spring before he died. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the specific exhaustion of someone who has been bracing against something heavy for a long time and finally felt it lift. But Sunday morning, James Ofaka called. Sonia had found one more document, and when I understood what it meant, how long this had actually been planned, I had to sit down and stay very still for a long time. James Okafor called at 8 a.m. Sunday. No greeting, just, "Sonia found something. You need to come in." The document was dated 3 years ago, not months, years. A preliminary draft, incomplete, never filed, of a guardianship petition prepared by Garrett Lowe's firm, arguing that Madeleine Mills showed signs of cognitive decline and was no longer capable of managing her own financial affairs. 3 years ago, I was 64, sharp as I'd ever been, running 14 properties, negotiating leases, managing contractors, reading every line of every contract myself. Renee had been building this case before she'd ever asked me for a single dollar. James watched my face while I read. When I looked up, he said quietly, "This wasn't a plan born from desperation, Madeleine. This was always the plan." I set the document down, thought about every Sunday phone call, every coffee at my kitchen table, every time Renee had said, "I just worry about you living alone," or "Maybe you should think about simplifying," or "Derek knows people who could help manage the properties." Every word recontextualized in an instant. Not concern, reconnaissance. I drove home alone. Didn't call Vera, didn't call Noah, just needed an hour inside my own head without anyone asking if I was all right. Gerald's oak tree stood bare in the front yard, the last of the November leaves gone. I sat in my car and looked at it for a long time. He'd planted it the spring before his diagnosis, said he wanted something that would outlast both of us, something that would still be standing long after we were gone. "Build things that last, Maddie," that's what he used to say. "Everything else is just noise." I went inside and made coffee. Then I opened my laptop and got to work. The sentencing came 6 months later. Derek received 4 years, federal facility in Terre Haute. The fraud charges, the forged signatures, the loans taken in my name added weight the judge didn't overlook. Renee pleaded guilty, 16 months, minimum security, plus full restitution to all 9 victims. Dorothy Hale and the others got their money back, not immediately, not without pain, but back. Stuart Briggs lost his freedom and whatever was left of his professional reputation in the same afternoon. Garrett Lowe was debarred, faced civil suits from 3 separate parties. Last I heard, he was selling insurance in Indiana. Noah came over the evening after sentencing. He didn't look relieved the way I'd expected him. He looked like someone who had carried something heavy for a long time and set it down and wasn't sure what to do with his empty hands. We sat on the back porch, cold evening, the kind of April night in Chicago suburbs that can't quite decide if winter is finished. "How do you feel?" he asked. Honest answer? "Always." "Sad," I said, "and clear, both at the same time." He nodded like that made sense. Maybe at 21 it did. Maybe grief and clarity aren't as far apart as we think. After a while, he said, I want to learn the business, for real, not just because you need help, because I actually want to build something." He looked at me, the right way. "I know you do. I'd seen it in him for years. The same quality Gerald had, the same quality I needed at 29 with a duplex and no blueprint. The willingness to do the unglamorous work and not cut corners when no one was watching. Then we start Monday," I said. We drove to Cicero Avenue the following week, the duplex where it all began. Original tenants long gone, but the building still solid, good bones, fresh paint, a maple tree out front I planted myself the year I bought the place. We stood on the sidewalk. Noah had his notebook out, already asking questions about the roof inspection, the lease structure, the reserve fund calculation. I let him talk. Then I said, "Before any of that, before the numbers and the leases and the inspections, you need to understand what this actually is." He looked up. "Every building in this portfolio represents a transaction built on someone's trust, a tenant trusting that their home will be maintained, a lender trusting that I'll honor my word, a community trusting that I'm a decent neighbor." I looked at the duplex. The moment you treat that trust as a resource to extract instead of a responsibility to keep, you become something I don't want you to become. Noah was quiet for a moment. "Is that what happened to her?" he asked. "She just stopped seeing it that way?" I thought about the 3-year-old guardianship draft, the careful architecture of a betrayal built so slowly even I hadn't seen it coming. "I think she stopped seeing people as people," I said. "And once you do that, everything else follows." He wrote that down. I didn't tell him to. He just did. Renee sent a letter from prison 4 months in. 1 page. No excuses, no appeals. Just, "I'm sorry for what I tried to take from you. Please take care of Noah. That's all I have left to ask." I read it once, folded it, put it in a drawer. Not because I was done being angry. I wasn't sure I'd ever be entirely done with that. But because the letter wasn't really for me. It was for a version of herself she was trying to locate somewhere inside a minimum security facility in central Illinois. I hoped she found it. I genuinely did. Some mornings I still sit at the kitchen table before Noah arrives and think about that dinner table in Elmhurst, the wine glass that kept refilling, the careful questions from strangers about property consolidation and retirement simplification. How close it came. 1 hour longer at that table and I would have gone upstairs, sat across from Garrett Lowe, held a pen with my drugged and compliant hand, and signed away 40 years of work without remembering any of it by morning. That thought doesn't frighten me the way it used to. It steadies me. Because I'm still here, still standing, still walking through rental properties with my grandson and his notebook of good questions. Gerald's oak tree is still in the front yard, and Mills Property Group is still mine. Some people will tell you that family is everything. I believe that. I just learned the hard way that family is built from trust and choice, not from blood and assumption. Noah chose me when it cost him something real. That's my family. Everything else was just a lesson I needed to learn before the end of my story could be the beginning of his.